Only. Conditions apply at volkswagen.com.au. Dealer licence 65541.
The 5AA Breakfast Show. The news, the issues.
We're looking at a $17 billion revenue write-down.
Andrew Rock, Shadow Finance Minister, the government says this is a pathway back to surplus.
Well, the trouble is a sort of fundamental dishonesty about what the Treasury has put forward. They keep having forecasts which are unbelievable. They're too optimistic.
They'll get worse.
They'll get worse.
The 5AA Breakfast Show.
Weekday mornings from 6.
On 1395.
Adelaide's 5AA.
Interactive radio.
Tweet at 1395 5AA.
Peter Godfrey.
18 minutes past 5. Let's take a look at what's been happening in New Zealand. Selwyn Manning, livenews.co.nz. How are you, Selwyn?
Yeah, very good, Peter.
That's the way. And
you've had some rain over there.
We've had a bit, yes. It's been nice over the last few days, sort of on and off, but it's filling up the rain gauge nicely.
Oh, that's great. As long as the reservoirs are kind of topping up as well. That'll be
and the rainwater tanks
people.
and the dams and the creeks and all those sorts of things. So it's good. Yeah. Yes. Well, there's a great deal of similarities between your country and ours, and politically at the moment. That's very evident. We've just had our federal budget, and today it's your budget day. So a lot of hopes, expectations, bracing for bad news, all that kind of thing ahead of it. What's likely?
Well, just bear in mind that next year is election year, Peter, over here in New Zealand.
Yes.
So you can expect that this budget won't be as miserable as the last, or at least it'll give the impression anyway. But what are the big challenges?
For
the Finance Minister, Bill English, over here? It's the high New Zealand dollar. That's really having problem. There's a problem there relating to the New Zealand's export-led economy. All those burgeoning companies that are trying to establish themselves in offshore markets. The New Zealand dollar makes it very difficult for them to compete in some sort of meaningful way. The slow export-led recovery is tagged to that, and we can see that in the pre-budget figures that have come out of Treasury over the last few months, which really does show that production as a part of the GDP in that export sector is lagging behind. It's certainly better than where it was a year ago, but it's still a bit slow in a sense, and exporters and manufacturers have been finding it pretty tough. Unemployment, it's been holding up there just around the 7.2% of New Zealanders out of work. That dipped slightly a couple of weeks ago down into the top sixes, but that's still a problem area where the government is likely to make a move on. The current account deficit over here, Peter, it's a shocker. And what that means, the current account deficit, is basically all of the money that government and people of a country, or businesses as well, owe to overseas finances against money that is coming into the country. That deficit there is the current account deficit, and because most of New Zealand's banks are owned by Australia or overseas interests, and a lot of the service providers that provide social services here in New Zealand are owned by offshore, there's a flow of money going out of the country that is a problem. Now, the deficit there, the current account deficit, sits at over $10 billion. And if you look at the cumulative aspect of what is owed overseas, then it totals to around just over $150 billion debt to overseas interests. And what that comes down to is a massive 72% of GDP. Now, that's balanced, of course, of income coming in, but it's still a problematic area that the IMF is underscoring, is saying New Zealand's got to do stuff about that. So what can we expect in the budget over here in New Zealand? Well, it's really one where the government is trying to say, keep optimistic, we're your mates, people, and we'll look after you come election year if you look after us.
That's that
kind of thing.
That whole, good bloke thing that John Key puts forward.
Oh, yeah. So it's a smile and optimistic budget is the feel that we're getting. And just to note there, what he's doing here is typical John Key. It's classic John Key. He's been under pressure from the opposition parties on doing something about housing. They have come up with their own solutions and policy to the problem of the Auckland housing market being so high in value to purchase a house. Buying a house here in Auckland is so expensive compared to other places. But also the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, says houses in New Zealand overall are 25% above what they should be. Now, the government's been under pressure. It's been doing virtually nothing for all this 5 years it's been in office, but we expect it's going to do something about the housing issue today in the budget, and it's most likely a market-led kind of thing where the government will facilitate even more the urban limits of cities, for example, to be extended into rural pockets so that they can build more to adjust the supply. So if you've got more houses for sale compared to the people wanting to buy, that supply and demand equation kind of makes arguably makes the prices go down. But people are saying they need to do a lot more than that. Also, kids. There's been huge issues developing here in New Zealand where we have over 200,000 children in New Zealand out of a population of 4.2 that are considered to be living in poverty. And the government's been under pressure since the day it got into office 5 years ago to do something about this. It's done hardly anything at all. And once again, the opposition parties have been rallying their wagons, and nationals in government over here look pretty against the wall on this. Now it's expected that they're going to do something. It's not necessarily government handouts, but it sounds like there's a package where it's going to try and get business to come in and sponsor food in the schools to help kids get food in their bellies before they start learning. So that's another thing that's coming through.
Okay. Just as an aside, with the housing issue you got there, and sort of opening up the boundaries, moving housing into more rural areas, is that something that do New Zealanders react in any way to that? It's an issue that comes up here, the idea of urban sprawl that's often met with quite a bit of opposition. Is it much of an issue in New Zealand generally?
Yes, it's a polarised issue between those that have interest in conservative, more right-leaning economic governments against those that are more centrist and centre-left. The centre-left, like the Labour Party and the others, are saying, contain our cities, be smarter in how we design our cities, go up as opposed to out. Whereas the Nationals in government, they say, no, let it sprawl. And what they're saying here is, when you let it sprawl, the property developers, et cetera, make a lot more money out of it. And so their natural friends, they kind of are getting a bit of a benefit in the back pocket, if you like. I don't mean that in a corruption sense, but I mean in as far as making profits out of what we refer to as land banking over here.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's a polarised issue, yes.
Okay. Back on the budget, given, as you said, there's an election year next year in New Zealand, things like, the traditional tax increases on booze and cigarettes not likely to be a part of it?
Yeah, those booze and cigarettes budgets seem to have long gone here. Generally, it's not so much one that factors. I mean, it used to be, going back a couple of decades, that was a big issue. And people would be going to the petrol station and topping up, filling up their car, knowing that there was going to be extra taxes applied to consumption in that way. These were the times when Muldoon and co ruled the country with regulatory fists, and New Zealand really was, budget days were scary things unless it was an election year when there were handouts. With it now, the successive governments since the 80s have been, the market rules the country. If the people are prepared to pay something, they've got to cough up the goods for that. There are moves to put in layers of more tax, like, for example, a transport-type petrol-type tax, if you like, in Auckland to help pay for its infrastructure developments on the roads, etc., etc. But governments are still a bit reticent to whack that up too much, so that's unlikely to factor too much, Peter.
Okay. All right. Moving on to another political issue that's current now, your preferential voting system. Now, ours is hard enough to get our heads around at times. You had a referendum 2011?
Yeah, last time. Yeah, in 2011.
For an overhaul of your MMP system, which is mixed member proportional voting. But what's happening? So there was to be an overhaul, but not now. Is that right?
There was a huge outpour of people saying, keep MMP but overhaul it, just like what you said there. MMP is basically that if a party gets 5% of the vote or more, then it's assured of getting into government. Right. Or if one electorate MP, one candidate, should I say, if they win their seat, well, their party doesn't need that 5%. It can go in on the on the percentage of that one MP, if you like. So the thing about overhauling it, people saying, we want MMP to stay, it's doing the job, but we want it overhauled. Those were the two areas that they were talking about. One, they wanted that 4% pretty much or lower relating to the percentage that a party needs to get into Parliament, or get rid of that coattails thing where if one MP gets a seat but doesn't get the enough percentages, they can drag in quite a number of MPs behind them depending on how many percentages they get. They wanted that out of the way. If you win your seat, you go in, but lower the threshold down. Now the government that can affect the way that the government kind of positions its campaign in an election year when it, like you've probably heard in weeks and months and things like that, where I'll say, well, the national-led government, well, it's got a posse of small parties around it that support it. Two of them, like the ACT Party's got a party of one MP, United Future's got one MP, Māori Party's got three. So they all help the Nationals get over the line, if you like. Right. Now, if the Nationals adjusted to what the people said in the vote, to adjust these things, it would be harder for it to rule next time around. And so John Key has said yesterday, in my view, in general, people are reasonably happy with the way MMP is operating now. And when asked if his decision was the end of the matter, he says, yep, as far as I'm concerned, yeah. And what he was talking about there is the government's decided it's not going to listen to what the people said in the referendum. It's decided it's not going to do anything about MMP at all.
So it's going to stay as it is.
It's going to stay as it is.
So no doubt other sides of politics are going to be attacking him on that, no doubt?
Oh, they have been. It's been a big issue this week, and everybody is livid about the arrogance of it. So I'd say that the budget's got to be a total sweetener, Peter. It's got to be peppermints and chocolates all round for people to continue to like these guys as they approach election year.
You sound very fired up this morning, Selwyn, so I sense the concerns and the seriousness of it. Yeah.
This is the State of Origin final.
There it is. Very good. All right, Selwyn, well, good luck with that budget. And hope the devil in that detail is a kind one, once it's all revealed today. Many thanks, Selwyn, and we'll catch up again next week.
Okay, Peter.
Cheers. Bye-bye. Selwyn Manning in New Zealand. For more news from New Zealand, go to livenews.co.nz.
Top deals and top service on your new Honda. Top of Glen Osmond Road, Nordic Honda.